Okay, so the special issue in English studies on metamodernism is a product of the research project that Dennis and I have been involved in. We investigate the reception of the contemporary British novel as modernist. And so we noticed that reviewers were using the label to categorize and define British novels. We also saw how authors like Will Self and Tom McCarthy used the label to identify their own work with the work of high modernist writers. And we were working on this and also started to investigate the academic debate about this and came across some various texts which dealt with the issue. Mainly the text by David James and Umila Seshagiri, which was published in PMLA in 2014. And that kind of functioned as a starting point for our own project.
Yes, because they also recognized the return of modernism in the British novel, and they actually labeled that metamodernism, which brought us to the metamodernism debate. And also made us organize a so-called expert meeting in October 2015, where we brought together scholars, literary scholars from the Netherlands, the UK, Ireland, Belgium, Poland, Japan, and there we also read James and Seshagiri together, and we discussed the connections between the return of modernism and metamodernism, and the theme issue basically is a product of that day. The very proceedings of that day is very product of the expert meeting in 2015.
Okay, so the question of what metamodernism is still open to debate. There's various and sometimes opposing strands within academia. On the one hand, we have the article by Tim Vermeulen and Robin van der Akker from 2010, in which they posed metamodernism as a kind of cultural sensibility, a structure of feeling is what they called it, which oscillates, their word, between a kind of modernist search for authenticity, sincerity, ethical values, and a postmodern relativism or irony and playfulness. And they relate this tendency to a kind of broader cultural landscape, political landscape as well. That's the one strand. On the other hand, we have the article by James and Seshagiri, in which they pose metamodernism as a cultural archive, a kind of an archive, a period in time which produced modernist styles and techniques, and authors in the 21st century, according to them, go back to that period in time and use those styles and techniques in contemporary literature and adapt them to the 21st century context. And in our research, basically, we take that as a starting point. We are interested in the return of modernism in literature, in contemporary British literature. And so we investigate how the return of modernism fits within this concept of metamodernism, these various strands. And this is also why we created a special issue to investigate that further.
Well, that very much depends, of course, on your definition of metamodernism and which of the two or more strands you follow. But I'd say a recurring theme is the relationship with postmodernism, the idea of the demise of postmodernism or the perceived demise of postmodernism. That's a topic you see across the board, as it were, in the metamodernism debate. And also perhaps the relation with other isms. In Vermeulen van den Akker, romanticism is a very important touchstone. And of course in our research project, we're very much interested in the relation between metamodernism and modernism, or high modernism perhaps. So that's a recurring theme, how metamodernism relates to earlier isms or earlier structures of feeling, and especially then postmodernism. Content-wise, perhaps metamodernism is clearly a manifestation in culture of responses to contemporary concerns like 9/11, the economic crisis of the mid-2000s, the credit crunch, immigration crises, etc. All kinds of phenomena that you can't ignore and respond to with a postmodern ironic stance. So metamodernism is also a way to, in art, to process those kind of historical events, very much crises events in the early 20th century. And yes, for us, of course, we are very much concerned with how that structure feeding metamodernism relates to modernism, the modernism that's often placed historically in the early 20th century.
So in this special issue, we take the article by James and Seshagiri as a starting point for a further exploration of how modernism returns, or has returned in contemporary literature. We felt that at that moment that was still under-researched, and the debate that's been going on about metamodernism is quite theoretical and abstract perhaps. And so for the special issue, we consciously included poetry, and we looked at texts and works of non-British writers as well. And we also included a group of international scholars to broaden the debate. And the special issue presents extensive case studies with very detailed close readings of works that can be classified as meta-modern, but that certainly look at the way modernism and postmodernism has shaped contemporary British fiction. And we combine these close readings with a broader cultural historical analysis in an attempt to give illustrations of that theoretical debate about metamodernism. And by doing so, the authors in the special issue also test the usefulness of the label metamodernism.
Over the past 2 years, we've been working together with Professor Anthony Rowland of Manchester Metropolitan University, with whom together we started a network also titled Metamodernism, that started way back in October 2015 with the expert meeting we told you about before. It's Art and Humanities Research Council funded network, and we organized a couple of conferences and public events. And those events will be concluded this year in July at Radboud University in Nijmegen.
Yes, the conference will take place from July 3rd to 5. We kick off with a reading by Will Self on July the 3rd, and then we have 2 full days of papers all about metamodernism. We're not just focusing on literature, but also on architecture, visual arts, and music. And for more information about the conference and the Metamodernism project, viewers can visit our website.